So excited to be here today to talk to all of you about the topic of dating with chronic pain and illness. Like Rick said, I have been a patient of his. I'm also a counselor. I can't claim to be a doctor, but I wish I could. But yeah, I'm a counselor and life coach and author. And I thought before we dive in, I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. I've been living with chronic pain and illness for many years, since my teens. So the dating and relationships aspect of life has been a topic I've thought about a lot over time. And one of my biggest struggles was that no one seemed to have any clear answers or useful information for what to do if I wanted to date or have a relationship while living with my chronic health issues, particularly when I was most debilitated. The people I was turning to for help, while very well-meaning, I don't think really had any lived experience of living with chronic health issues. And I think had a lot of trouble relating to what I was experiencing and the degree to which I was struggling. So their advice wasn't always something that I could implement easily or at all. And this is what led me to explore the topic on my own. And I thought, well, if there aren't any resources, maybe I need to start creating some. And this eventually led me to write my book on the topic. Side note, I'm going to revise and update my book a little bit this year. So that should be coming out, a revised version I'm expecting to be able to put out next year, early next year. So let's get started. I'd like to actually start just by asking a question, and you can briefly type an answer into chat if you're comfortable. I'll read out some of them that are typed in. The first question is, what do you perceive as being your biggest obstacles when it comes to dating and possibly meeting a partner? If you're willing to share what you feel your obstacle is, that would be great. So energy, yes, energy is a really big one when living with ME/CFS. Where to meet people when you're more isolated? Absolutely, yeah. Lack of energy, so not able to fully participate in the beginning dating stages. Yes, not being able to do the activities that my date suggests. Yeah. Fatigue and constant unpredictability. And yeah, again, that unpredictability can be really hard when you are trying to make plans and stick to plans. Debilitating pain, not sure when to disclose disability status. The people that you meet are married or gay, people understanding, not understanding, setting expectations. So I won't go through all of them, but yes, this is really valid what you're experiencing, and so common to so many of us that are living with chronic health issues. These are the things we face, and out of fairness, this is hard stuff, and there aren't always easy answers. But I think we can see from the chat here that we're not alone. You're not alone. We're in this together. And so what you have listed here, energy, being able to go on dates, how to deal with answering questions about your condition. These are all things I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to ask another question. What are your biggest fears when it comes to dating? A little different, but similar to the first question. What are you most concerned about might happen or may not happen? A fear of rejection, yes. And I think that's a really big one when we're living with chronic health issues, is we have this whole other layer where it's not just us, but we also have this health issue that we're bringing with us. And so that fear is very, very valid and relatable. Why would someone date me if I wouldn't date me? They will leave because how much help I need. They will perceive me as a burden. I can't keep up with a partner. Yeah, so again, none of you are alone here. This is a really common experience of all of us who have lived with these conditions, feeling fears of being unwanted because I'll be seen as a burden. Yeah. Boyfriend resenting me for not being able to keep up, partner not being able to deal with conditions. Absolutely. These are all really valid concerns. And I think sometimes when we express them, I know in my experience, expressing these concerns to otherwise healthy people. Like I've heard a lot of platitudes like think positively, or you'll meet the right person when the time is right, or maybe you just need to appreciate what you have right now. And I find that that can be pretty invalidating. The reality is, when you're coping and managing and surviving with your symptoms, meeting a partner can be a very complicated and difficult thing depending on the severity of your symptoms. And I think that's why it's really hard to be able to hold compassion for yourself through this. This is not an easy thing. On the one hand, you're getting by day to day managing symptoms. And then on the other hand, you want to have some fun and enjoy and have connection with another person. And it can really feel like these two things are very at odds. And that's what makes this difficult. And you're certainly not alone feeling that way. As we know, chronic pain and illness can be really isolating and lonely. And it's only natural to want to have closer relationships, to feel connected, to have an intimate relationship, to really long for someone to share your life with. And it can also be very hard to find and create when you're living with a condition that takes so much out of you. Out of fairness, this is tough. And that's probably why there aren't a lot of answers out there for us in this situation. So some of you may have had relationships in the past, and some of you may have tried dating, and some of you may have had less experience with intimate partnerships. So we're all starting from different points here today. But the important thing is to start at your beginning. It's important to set yourself up well so you can do your part to aim for the best possible outcome. We can't control everything, but we can do our best to be ready. And again, always leading with self-compassion. This is not easy. And it's especially not easy because while dating is meant to be fun and exciting, and it's our time to be playful, chronic pain and illness adds just so many more layers that can take a lot of the fun out of it sometimes. Like, how am I going to walk 3 blocks to get to the restaurant? Or how long will I be able to sit for? Or is the chair going to be too hard for me? Or, I can't drive that far. How am I going to figure out how to meet? There are just so many extra things, pacing, all of those things. So let's start a little bit by looking at your starting point, starting at your beginning. And so here I like to say, develop some clarity around what you're looking for. And so what am I talking about? Getting an idea of what you're looking for when it comes to meeting someone or having a relationship. Maybe you just want to dip a toe into dating to see what it's like and if you're able to balance it with your health issues. Maybe you're just thinking, okay, a casual hookup is all I want or all I can manage right now, or perhaps a long-term relationship is more really your priority. Perhaps an online or long distance romance. I do have a couple of clients who have chosen to do that and have found that it's really worked for them. Or perhaps it's more of a companionate type relationship, less sexual and more of a very deep, intimate friendship that is romantic, but in a more companionate way. Open, polyamorous, or other non-traditional relationships. I have a colleague who has chronic health problems, and he found that worked really well for him. And perhaps you're not ready to date yet and you're not interested. And all of those things are okay. It's just that I like to take this time and set an expectation of what you want. And also it's a time to explore the difference between what do I believe is possible for me versus what do I actually want. So issues of feeling deserving might arise here as well. So for example, in the past, I've often thought, oh, I only believe I could casually date right now. No one would want to have a relationship with me. But then I ended up in that situation and I realized, oh no, actually, I really actually do want a relationship. And the casual dating is not going to work for me. So this might be a chance to gently start challenging any limiting beliefs that might be preventing you from going for what you actually want. It's okay if you don't fully believe it's possible, but just sort of getting clear and saying, well, what do I actually want? What might be beyond what you think you deserve? So let's take a look at the next slide. let's talk a little bit more about you, and specifically your values, and what are your relationship values? So I like this exercise, and I think I actually got this from Rick years ago, and I've modified it a bit, but it's a values exercise to get you clear on what is important to you in dating, in a relationship, or a partner specifically. So what I'm going to provide, or I guess Rick will provide in the materials tomorrow when they're posted, is a core values exercise. And you can do this for any area of your life, but here I'm suggesting going through it with the lens of dating. What are your values when it comes to dating? And so the instructions for this exercise are all here on the sheet, but essentially you go through all of the values, and there's a second page to this, and highlight all the ones that are important to you. And then get another color pen or highlighter and narrow that down again until you have 10. And so what is important to you when you're dating? Perhaps it's adventure, perhaps it's understanding, or peace, or calm, or fun. Getting clear on what it is actually that you would like from this experience. So that handout will be attached. And the second part of this are feelings. And this is another way to get clear on what you're looking for. How do you want to feel when you're dating and when you're with the person you're seeing? And I have a great exercise for this that I really like. And this is the core desired feelings exercise, and it's from Danielle Laporte's Desire Map. And this will be attached in the materials as well. And just quickly, how you would go through this is you would brainstorm all the emotions that you would like to have when you're dating, when you're on a date, when you're thinking about the person you're dating. Maybe you want to feel happy, curious, joyful, adventurous. And you brainstorm all of those feelings and then go through and pick the 3 to 5 most important to you. So let's say adventurous, happy, and curious off the top of my head. You would work with those 3 now. So taking the first one, adventurous, you would ask yourself, well, what does adventurous feel like? So when I feel adventurous, perhaps I feel playful, engaged, curious, excited, confident, getting an idea of what adventurous feels like. And then the final step is to brainstorm, and this is my favorite part, is to get a big sheet of paper and brainstorm a list of all the conditions, resources, experiences, needs, everything that you need in order to bring about that feeling of adventurousness. So and nothing is too big and nothing is too small. And so what that might look like is, okay, well, if I want to feel adventurous, perhaps I'm doing something that I haven't done before, or I'm going to a coffee shop I haven't been to before. And maybe I like to wear my red lipstick to feel adventurous. And maybe the person I'm meeting, I'd like them to have certain qualities. And so just brainstorming all of the things that bring about that feeling of adventurousness for you. And on the back side, the second page of this handout, there's a long list of lots of possible core desired feelings. If you're having trouble coming up with some ideas on your own, there's a lot to choose from on the other side of that list. And so once you've gone through these 2 exercises, the values and the feelings, I recommend writing them out, your top 10 values and your 3 to 5 core desired feelings, and posting them somewhere visible so that you can refer back to them regularly. I actually have mine posted right next to me right here, and I update them every year. And I find that they're really helpful to refer back to. And if I'm feeling like things aren't working or I'm feeling unsatisfied, I can often look at my list and say, okay, well, what's one thing I can do to feel more adventurous today when I'm dating? Or what can I do? What's one thing I can do to bring about that feeling? And just to confirm I'm aligned with my values. What you're also going to have then are those brainstormed sheets on how to bring about the feelings you want. You're going to have a plan all written out for you on how to achieve the feelings that you'd like to have on your date. So here you have a guide set up for you. And what I will say is, while we're getting clear about what you'd like here, I think being flexible about it is going to be important as well as you move through the dating process. It's good to be clear on what we're looking for, but be willing to adjust if needed. And I think we all know that flexibility is so important when we're living with these health conditions, because we can't always predict how we're going to feel and things change. So once you've established a bit about yourself, your values, the emotions you'd like to have, let's talk about the person you'd like to meet. And here, just a few things to quickly think about. What are you looking for in your person? What sort of communication style are you looking for? Are you looking for someone who texts regularly throughout the day, or is that too tiring for you? Would you like someone who's more inclined to message you at the end of the day or have one phone call? Communication style can encompass so many different things. Maybe you're looking for someone who is willing to talk openly and freely and comfortably around the health issues and to collaborate together, or perhaps you're looking for something else. So just giving some thought to the communication style you're looking for. Energy level in the person that you're dating. And this has been a big one in my life too. Having someone who's very high energy can be very difficult sometimes if I don't have a lot. And so just contemplating, or maybe someone who has a lot of energy helps boost your own energy, just giving some of that thought. Their personality, their interests. Would you like to have shared interests? Are there specific interests that you would like to share with other people? Values, we've talked about your values, but what sort of values would you like the other person to have? And qualities, what are there specific qualities that you're looking for in another person? And if you like to write and keep a journal, this would be a great opportunity to take some time and write a little bit about the person you'd like to meet and making some notes about each of these categories and what's important to you. So we've explored what you're looking for so far. So now let's take a moment to look at what you don't want. And I wanted to tell a little story earlier about a client of mine, and it's related to this. So she lives with chronic health issues. She's got a lot of smell sensitivity and chronic fatigue and a variety of other conditions. And she thought, the only type of dating I'm going to be able to do is casual dating and hookups, because I don't have it in me to have a long-term relationship. I just don't have the energy to invest in that. And so she started going on a few dates here and there, and she was enjoying herself, but she found that the type of person that she was looking for wasn't the sort of person who was looking for a casual relationship. She wanted someone who had a personality of someone who wanted to be in a longer-term committed relationship. And so she's now decided to take a break for a little while to recover a little more, so that she can then have more capacity to increase her energy envelope and to date more long-term. And that's sort of where the flexibility comes in. Sometimes we discover it takes trying something to discover whether or not it's going to work. But yeah, let's look at what you don't want. And so, deal breakers. So these are really important. What is your bottom line? And I think this is really important for us because we can often be tempted to ignore our deal breakers, especially if we tend to be people pleasers, or if we think that our options are limited because of our disability or health issues. So we might feel we just have to accept what we're getting, even if it's not working out for you. So another thing to get clear on are deal breakers. And I'm going to give you a list of some examples. These may not be yours, but it's an example to get you started on some ideas. So a deal breaker for you might be someone who wants you to be active or very active. Even moderately active might be too much. And it's not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just, well, the activity levels don't match, and that's okay. So this isn't going to work. People who don't believe your symptoms or they're invalidating, another deal breaker potentially. They repeatedly forget about your discomfort. It can be really exhausting to have to remind people over and over about the condition that you have. Them being unreliable or inconsistent. avoidant or frequently unavailable. So far, a lot of the things we've talked about, this is tough on our nervous system. We know that our nervous system, we're trying to calm our nervous system with these conditions that we have. And a lot of these things that I've listed here under deal breakers can really set your nervous system on fire. And so I like to say, if something's happening that's setting your nervous system on fire, that's a good time to think about whether this is a deal breaker. Someone who doesn't respect or isn't willing to accommodate any special needs you may have, whether it's short dates or mobility aids you have or other needs. If you don't feel safe around them or you don't feel able to voice your needs, it's really important for you to be able to voice your needs when you're dating. And of course, abuse of any kind is always a deal breaker. Verbal, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, psychological, any kind of abuse. And these deal breakers might seem obvious, but again, it's not unusual to be tempted to compromise your deal breakers if you feel you can't do any better or you don't deserve more. Of course you can do better, but if your mind but our minds like to lie to us about these things. And the truth is, we also live in a world that is ableist, and it can be really tough. The world is not always designed for us, but even if doing better means being on your own for a while, you can do better and you don't need to compromise on your deal breakers. I've had many clients with chronic pain and illness who have found relationships. I know it's possible. I have as well. I know it's possible. It is harder. Again, having compassion for, yeah, this is hard. The deal breakers, again, here you can write down the list of your deal breakers and keep it handy. This list is important because it's also going to help keep you accountable to yourself. If you start to feel uncomfortable or uneasy with how things are going, whether it's on the first date or the 10th date, if you become aware of a deal breaker, that needs to be it. The most important thing is that you're taking care of yourself. You need to come first. Not just your physical self, but your emotional self, your spiritual self as well. Having strong boundaries is really important when it comes to dating when we have chronic health issues. And I know it can be really hard to say no sometimes, especially when you really badly want to connect with someone. It can be hard to say no because, you don't want your health condition to be the reason why you can't do more. You don't want it to get in the way. It can be hard to say no if you're having a good time. And there have been times when I've thought, well, they're not treating me that well, but at least I'm getting something. And it can be hard to give that something up, especially when you've been living without intimacy for a while or for a long while. It can be really hard to give that something up. But again, we know that stress exacerbates symptoms. And if you're in an unhealthy, unsupportive relationship or dating situation, you might find your symptoms increasing. So tolerating deal breakers, again, sets the nervous system on fire. And we want to avoid nervous system fires. And we'll talk more about this later. Okay, so now that you've done your part to prepare for a date, let's talk about where to meet people, because this is another big one. How and where to meet someone. So there we have the usual online dating. This is where most people, I think I read the other day, 2/3 of people now meet their partners on online dating. I hear nothing but complaints about online dating from otherwise healthy people and also people with disabilities. But we have the usual Bumble, Tinder, Match. I do like online dating for the reason it's a great way to meet a whole lot of other people that you would normally never meet. So it's great for meeting people, that initial numbers introduction. But it does come with the downsides of dating apps. There are dating apps specifically for people with disabilities. There's Dating for Disabled, Whispers for You, Special Bridge. There are others. I haven't been on them much for quite a few years. When I was looking into them more, I found that it was really hard to find anybody on them in Vancouver. And of course, the range of disabilities on these sites is very large. So I think, the odds of meeting someone on a more traditional app are better just because there's so many more people on them. But this may be worth checking out as well. Online activities like gaming. So I have a client and she likes to play games online, and she met someone that she would game with regularly, and they started talking outside of the gaming, and they've actually started a relationship. And this is one of my clients who's having a long distance relationship. She lives in Vancouver. Her partner's in Seattle. They do a lot of gaming together and they see each other once a month or so, and it's working out really well for her. Then we have online forums such as Reddit. So again, I have a client here who ended up chatting with someone on Reddit and they really hit it off and they've started dating. They've been together for a year now. So it's not a guarantee, but it's always possible. And I like some of these methods because they don't take as much energy, although they do take energy. And I know not everybody can spend a lot of time on their computers. There are matchmakers, traditional good old matchmakers. They are quite expensive, but there are people out there who will specifically find people for you. There are other dating services. There's one called, for example, It's Just Lunch, where you go out with a group of people for lunch and you see if there are any matches there. Again, that might take too much energy, and also it's more expensive. Speed dating, I put that on there. I don't know if it's really feasible. I certainly don't think it's feasible with anyone with ME/CFS. I've done it a few times in the past, and it can be quite tiring because you meet 10 or 15 people and you spend 3 to 5 minutes with each of them. So if you have some energy, that might be a fun activity, but yeah, I don't recommend it for a low energy way to meet someone. And then there's some good old standards: striking up casual conversations with strangers, asking your family or friends if they know someone who they could introduce you to. And one of the ones I really like is just making new friends first to expand your social circle, because often if you make new friends, they know people who might be good matches. I have a friend and she's pretty severely disabled, and she has really been wanting to meet a partner, but she's also very socially isolated for friends. And so she decided to start with making friends. So she went on Bumble. So Bumble's great because there's an option to just meet friends. And so she's met some friends through Bumble now, which has been really wonderful and is her first step towards finding a partner. And then last of all, if there's someone you know and you like, take a risk, ask them out. You never know what might happen. So those are sort of wrap up the main ideas for where to meet someone. And let's say you've met someone. Well, now what? Let's talk about some ideas for dates. So I tried to think of some ideas for low energy date activities. Let's look at movies. Movies are a good one, online or in person. I know a lot of people now doing online dates. So particularly people who are a little more long distance, or perhaps they live, if you live in Vancouver and your partner lives in Abbotsford, I have some clients who do that with their partners who are like an hour or two away. Meeting online, watching a movie together, so you can chat and comment on it, but you can still be in the comfort of your own home. Sitting at a beach or a park, you don't have to walk or do activities, you can just sit and enjoy, and that's okay. Getting a coffee, a tea, or a drink. Card or board games. These have really been making a comeback, and they can be a lot of fun. And if you have the energy, suggesting meeting and playing some card or board games. It's a great way to get to know someone and have some fun together. Online games. There's a lot of games online. If the two of you share that interest, going for a drive. Going for a drive is great. I love this one. If I'm not driving, if there's someone who's willing to drive me, I'm more than happy to be a passenger. Go for a drive on an afternoon or an evening. Go for foot massages. This is actually one of my favorite ones and is a fairly low energy one if you are okay to leave the house and go somewhere. There are a variety of different places here now in Vancouver where you don't even need to book ahead. You can just show up and they have a row of chairs and you can sit next to each other and both get foot massages at the same time. I like that one a lot. Painting or crafting together, stand-up comedy. Again, you can do this online, like you might watch a movie together online or in person. And the great thing about comedy is it's so good for your nervous system. And having a good laugh can really help just elevate the mood, which we know is so good for these conditions. So laughing is always a good one. And like picnics at the beach or the park, if that's comfortable for you. So I think there are probably a lot more ideas out there for low energy dates, and only your imagination sets your limits. But remember to choose things because not just because you can do them, but because you enjoy them. Dating is meant to be pleasurable. And again, it can be hard. Just getting out and doing something takes a lot out of us, but remembering that this is meant to be fun too. And don't be afraid to ask for what you would like to do or have someone come out to where you're located. So for example, if you've met someone, you're in Vancouver, they live in Surrey, and you know realistically you're not going to be able to drive out there. And perhaps if you have to drive out there, that's a deal breaker for you. It's okay to ask them if they're willing to drive in to see you more often than you go out there. You're allowed to ask for that. We want to make dating as easy as possible for you. We want to make it easy and fun, which is sometimes easier said than done, but it's always keeping in mind that we want to be having fun with this. Okay, so far in this presentation, we've discussed you, what you're looking for, your deal breakers, how to meet people, date ideas. We're moving along here with dating. So let's talk about the actual dates themselves. Once you get on a date, how much to disclose, when, and how? I think this is the question I get asked the most, and it is maybe perhaps one of the hardest ones to answer because everybody is different. But there are a few things, a few thoughts I have, a few things I do know, and suggestions. So before a first date, providing only the information that's absolutely necessary. For example, I once went on a date with a guy who was deaf, and he gave me a heads up beforehand. He said, you know, I'm deaf, I have one hearing aid, I have about 30% hearing, and I read lips. And I thought, okay, great. That's good to know before a date. I really didn't need to know any more details like how it affects his relationships, how it would affect me. He didn't apologize for it. He just said, this is the way it is. And I thought, yeah, and that was all I needed to know. So, you know, we don't need to provide a lot of information at first. If you have a mobility aid, for example, that you might want to give someone a heads up about, you can let them know. If you only feel like you could go out for an hour, you could let them know that you have low energy and you can only meet for an hour, or you could just say, I only have an hour. So I like to hold back just a little bit at the beginning because I want to get to know the other person first too, to see if I like them. The next point, I suggest avoid talking about your disability or your symptoms too much on the first few dates. Use this opportunity, like I said, instead to get to know the other person, which will help you decide if there's someone you'd like to keep seeing. I think sometimes when you have an illness or a disability, you put the power in the other person's hands to decide if they want to be with you. And it can feel that way, that it's actually up to them. And that, I think, you know, it's disempowering, it's disencouraging, and it can really eat away at your self-confidence. So rather than focusing on how they will accept you, rather think about whether, well, are you actually going to like them? And that tends to be a more empowering perspective if you can find that place. Or this is a tricky one. You may wish to speak only generally about your pain or illness and provide more information when and if they ask questions. So one of the answers I've given in the past is, well, I've had a brain or nervous system injury, which is creating pain and other symptoms in various parts of my body. I don't tell them my diagnoses. If they want to know more, they can ask, but quite often I don't get questions when I say it sort of like that. And I like keeping it vague at the beginning. That being said, though, we don't want to wait too long to disclose key information about your condition. Otherwise, the person you're seeing may feel misled or deceived. It really requires finding a balance that works for you. And again, out of fairness, this is hard. It is. And I'm trying to advance. Here we go. You don't owe anyone an explanation for what you experience with your health. Only share if it feels safe, comfortable, and right to you. You don't need to explain anything. It's okay not to. I think often we feel we need to explain ourselves or over explain ourselves because people really don't understand what we're going through unless they've been through it themselves. So just something to think about. And again, go at your own speed. If your speed is too slow for someone else, then they are not your person. And, again, this is tough. If we really like someone, but they need someone with more energy or they want to move faster, and that might just not be for us. There's no specific formula, essentially, for how long to wait and what to say. I just recommend giving a laundry list of diagnoses on the first or second date, because I don't think those are necessary for the other person to know right away. You don't know if you're even going to like them. And I think at first it's enough for them to know that you often have pain and fatigue that limits what you can do, and just keeping it general. And if dating looks like it's going to turn into something more long-term, then you disclose more, maybe, of your diagnoses and get more specific. Like maybe after 3 or 4 dates, if things are looking like you both want to keep going with it. Yeah, ultimately, I don't think that you need to say much until both parties are genuinely interested in each other and want to continue dating and have a longer term relationship. Again, the topic might come up sooner, and if you're comfortable with that, it's okay to talk about that as well. Again, and I want to reiterate, if you're wondering if you're going to be enough for someone else, contemplate instead if they're going to be enough for you and if they will be the right fit for you. And, I really want to emphasize that rather than having the spotlight on you and how you might have limitations or shortcomings, I'm really a fan of putting the spotlight on the other person and saying, okay, let's actually look at them and think about them. And this can be tough. And also, given everything that I've said, not everyone might respond respectfully to what you share. And so what do you do if someone's not responding respectfully? Here are how to reply to inappropriate questions or comments. I've heard a few of these in my time. So some ideas. Oh, I'm not comfortable talking about that right now. Or I'd rather stay away from the specific details until I know you a little better. I'm not ready to talk about that yet. Let's change the subject. Or I'd rather hear more about you right now. I talk about my symptoms as little as possible because they're really not who I am. And holding to a firm no if someone is really pushing you. If someone is pushing really hard to know the details of your condition, you don't have to answer. The pushing is also giving you an insight into this person and maybe an indication that maybe they're not someone you want to see again. Again, that's you deciding whether you like them. That they are doing this pushing says more about them than it does about you. And this is a great time to draw a boundary and say no. And, in these cases, I think using I statements is particularly helpful. Just as you can see the examples here, all except one are I statements. Sometimes it can be handled lightly and with a bit of humor, and other times a more serious response might be required to clarify a boundary. And speaking of boundaries, let's talk a little bit more about boundaries. So I'm going to just give you some examples of boundaries and how they relate to dating here. Don't be afraid to speak up, state your needs, boundaries, and limitations. Be kind, but firm. It's okay to have needs. I think so many of us have grown up where we've been invalidated, or our needs have not been met, or our needs have been invalidated. So this is certainly harder than just doing it. I understand that. Again, this is tough, but you can start by practicing and just seeing what happens when you ask for your need to be met. Be clear when voicing your boundaries. So rather than saying, oh, I think maybe it would be best if I, maybe didn't stay out for another hour, if I didn't stay out for an hour and a half, if I just kept it to an hour, instead saying, I'm only going to be able to go out for an hour tonight. Just being clear and confident. Boundaries sound like, I need to be in bed at 8. That's just the way I am. Or this chair is too hard. I prefer to sit on the softer bench. And something really struck me once. I have a friend, and he's an ex-football player. He's incredibly fit. He loves to work out, and he wakes up every morning at 4 a.m. to work out, something I will never do. But in order to wake up at 4 a.m, because he works out for 2 or 3 hours, he needs to be in bed by 8. And I remember when I first met him, and we'd be out doing things, and 7:30, 7:45 would roll around, and he'd say, well, no, I need to get going. And I'd say, but it's only 7:30. Why are you leaving? He's like, well, I need to be in bed by 8. And he just unapologetically set that boundary. He says, I wake up in the mornings to work out, so I need to be in bed by 8. And it just wasn't a big deal to him. And I thought, wow, if he can set a boundary like that, I can too. How is it any different if he's choosing to be in bed by 8 and I'm needing to be in bed by 8? I can say that. So we don't need to apologize for our boundaries. Thing with boundaries is you can't expect the other person to perfectly adhere to them. Your job is to enforce and maintain them. And I wish this wasn't the case. But, if I say I need to be in bed by 8, I can't expect that my date's always going to be looking at his watch and say, oh, it's, 7:30, we should get going because it's your bedtime soon. It's going to be up to me to say, oh, yes, we need to get going soon. And when he says, oh, come on, let's stay out, it's going to be up to me to say, you know what, I would love to stay out, but I really need to go to bed. And and here often your boundaries are more for yourself than others because the onus is on you to ensure they're being met, right? So I often say, boundaries, going to bed at 8 is more for me than for anyone else. I need to keep myself accountable to that and make sure that I stick to that. And maintaining boundaries can be hard, especially when you're having a good time. You're having a good time, you're out, you've been laughing, you have this boost of energy. Keep an eye on that long game and set an upper limit. I'm a really big fan of upper limits, actually. And this is something that I've come across a lot in my own life and how useful that is. So rather than saying, I'm going to do a minimum of 20 minutes of something, I'll say, I'm not allowed to do more than 20 minutes. And so setting an upper limit, again, for a date for me might be, I will walk 5 blocks max on this date. That's my upper limit. And I need to leave the date by 8. That is my upper limit. So I'm a big fan of upper limits. Yeah, and so there we have the piece about boundaries, but let's talk about if you find your symptoms increasing, because that can happen. You're stepping out of your normal routine, you're doing something different. And if you find your symptoms increasing, it's time to step back and ask yourself a few questions regarding dating. Is this just the natural effect of me extending myself a bit, or have I taken on too much? It would be normal if you start to date and you might have like a bit of an increase in symptoms, a bit of an increase in fatigue. Maybe that would just be normal and expected and it's manageable, or is it just too much? Am I tending toward people-pleasing behaviors and prioritizing someone else's happiness or comfort over mine? I know a lot of us are people pleasers, and I think having an illness, we don't want to inconvenience people and we try and accommodate them, but that can, again, lead to increased symptoms because we're pushing ourselves too hard. Is this tolerable, manageable, and sustainable? So if your symptoms are increasing, saying, okay, they're increasing, is it just a little bit and I can manage it, or is this just too much? And I'm just going to pause here for a moment and say, again, this is tough stuff, and there can be a lot of disappointment involved. When we have hopes, we really want to be able to do things, we want to date, and if we find we're hitting limits, or perhaps it's not sustainable right now, that can be very disappointing and frustrating and defeating. And I understand that, and that is part of what makes this difficult. Another thing to ask yourself, is this person enhancing my life, or is this connection causing me stress somehow? Is it setting my nervous system on fire? What is happening here? Is it just the additional activity, or is it something specific about the person? We want to keep that nervous system quenched, not on fire. What is my intuition telling me? And again, here, I like to make a distinction between my intuition and my anxious brain. When my anxious brain is going, I can't hear my intuition. So checking in with your intuition in a moment of peace or calm. And finally, this is a really good time to check back and loop around to the exercises we did in the beginning. Am I still aligned with my personal core values when it comes to dating and my core desired feelings? And have I been ignoring any of my deal breakers? Because that might also account for increasing symptoms. So we've covered a lot today, and I'm going to finish off by giving you a few more tools, tips, and tricks to make dating a little bit easier, because we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you. Yeah, so I just have a few more points. Go in with curiosity rather than expectations. Expectations can set us up for additional disappointment and suffering. And, I think we've all lived with a lot of disappointment. We know what that feels like. And if we can avoid that, or just avoid more extreme disappointment, that would be really great. So I like going in with curiosity. I wonder what's going to happen on this date, rather than I have to be there for an hour at least. I have to be able to sit on this chair. Instead, with curiosity, I'll say, I wonder how long I'll last today. I wonder if I'll be able to sit on that chair, or I wonder if there'll be a comfortable bench. But honestly, I've probably called ahead of time to find out if they've got comfortable seating. Viewing it as an experiment and just observing the results in a way scientists might observe the results. Okay, I'm going to experiment by going on this date. Let's just observe what happened as a result. Was it fun? Did I enjoy myself? Were there any symptoms afterwards? And another way of looking at it is practice. I love talking about practicing. Dating is practicing. So rather than putting a lot of pressure and emphasis on having to have this date go well, it's just practice. Let's see what happens. Let's observe the results. This one I really like a lot is doing positive visualizations about your dates going well. If anyone here has been doing any brain retraining, like the dynamic neural retraining system or Gupta, you might have been, you will know about positive visualizations. If you haven't, essentially what I'm suggesting is that you visualize the date you have coming up going well. And it doesn't even have to be based in reality. It's just got to, what we're doing is priming your brain, because your brain doesn't know the difference between having done something or having visualized it. So if you visualize it, for your brain, it's just as if you've done it. So if you visualize your date going well once a day for the week leading up to your date, your brain will already think you've been on 7 successful dates, which is going to help you keep your symptoms lower, stay calmer, and be able to relax, enjoy yourself a little more on a date. And so essentially how you do this is find a private spot where no one can hear you, and out loud, it's important to do it out loud, tell the story of the date that's gone well. So actually speaking in the present tense. So it might sound like, I drive up to the coffee shop and there is the perfect parking spot for me. The parking is so easy. I head into the coffee shop and I see the person I'm meeting right away. I can tell it's them because they have a big smile on their face, and I immediately feel at ease. And I get a tea for myself and we sit down and we just start chatting, and we have so much in common and we hit it off, and I feel wonderful. I have energy that feels sustainable. I feel strong in my body. And that's sort of an example of how you would do the visualization. And you can get into really specific small details about how good your coffee or tea tastes, or the way the coffee shop looks on the inside. It doesn't need to be exactly how it's going to be, but it's a way of practicing some dates ahead of time. And I find this really effective. Another one is don't take anything personally. If anyone's reacting to you or your health issue or your disability, this is not about you, this is about them. And I don't have time to get into more of this, but I'm attaching in the materials a summary of the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. This is a little book, literally, it's a small book and it's thin. And there are 4 agreements that he talks about as a way of living life. And so one of them is don't take anything personally. He also talks about Don't make assumptions, which is another really good one. Always do your best, and acknowledging that your best is different on any given day, and being impeccable with your word. And that one specifically, I think, is important about how you talk to yourself, being kind to yourself, having compassion for yourself. A few more tips. Intuition is key, allowing your gut to guide you. You don't ever need to apologize for your disability, your illness, or your body, ever. And I think sometimes we can be really tempted to apologize, but you don't have anything to apologize for. And just remember that. Take your time on your dates. Take time getting to know someone. There's no rush. You're allowed to go at your own pace, at the pace your body needs to go. And meet the tough moments with self-compassion. Out of fairness, this is hard. Dating is meant to be fun, but it can be hard too with it is hard with all these extra layers that we have. You don't know how it's going to turn out, and there are no guarantees, but you can have some fun. Don't forget to have fun and enjoy yourself. For all the seriousness in this presentation, this is meant to be fun. Be playful, experiment, observe what happens, and enjoy